You know, you could actually watch Cars 1 and then skip Cars 2 and watch Cars 3 and you won't miss a beat. You won't have no context to understand for anything. You'll understand everything.
No, you will not. Cars 2 is important. This is a simple 25 reasons why Cars 2 needs to be watched before you go and watch Cars 3. Even though it might not seem it on face level, but you know what? Cars 2 is just that brilliant and genius of a movie that only high IQ individuals truly understand why you must watch Cars 2 before watching Cars 3, or else Cars 3 does not make sense. Let's get into this list. At number 1, we have one of the most important ones, and it was one of the minor plot details of Cars 2. You see Mater at his races in Cars 3. In Cars 2, it establishes that he doesn't take Mater to his races, which you might say, well, that was a concern that was only brought up in Cars 2. No, because Cars, the video game, proves that Mater was never at his pits beyond the tiebreaker race in the first movie. There are some cutscenes in there that take place at pit row, specifically one where you see Guido even, and Doc, of course, when he was still alive. I don't see Mater in those pits. So that confirms that Mater was not a part of his pit crew. He never took him to his races after the tiebreaker race, which Mater was only there because he just went along with the other townies. McQueen didn't invite them or anything. So that was definitely a big concern heading into Cars 2 when you have to understand why Mater's in those pits come Cars 3. At number 2, we're going to go into where McQueen got his headlights. Now, this one is also very, very important because not only does obviously he not have the headlights in Cars 1, but they don't get the headlights in Cars 3, so clearly it happened in between Cars 1 and 3. You need to know the context as to where he got those headlights from. And even Cars, the video games, they mention the fact that he has stickers. Mater National, there's a cutscene where he says he only has stickers. And Cars 1, again, he does not have headlights. They're just stickers. It's a pretty funny gag line before they talk about getting high with Dusty. You guys probably know what line I'm talking about. But point being, you need to know where McQueen got his headlights from. They're very vital to know where they got him from, especially because you're not going to understand when he starts putting on his headlights. You're going to be like, oh my God, when did he get headlights? That was such an important detail that I had to miss. Well, you would have missed if you didn't watch Cars 2. So that is another reason why you must watch Cars 2. On to number 3. Number 3, where the flame design is inspired from. Sure, you guys all know Cars 3 McQueen's paint design. It's the one he gets when Ramon paints him up before he heads off to the racing center. It is a hybrid of his rookie design and his World Grand Prix design. And you can see the flames coming from the lightning bolt, but the lightning bolt is his original lightning bolt, and then it transitions into the flames. Where do you get that, you might ask? Well, he got it from the World Grand Prix design. So he took the hybrid of the two and meshed it to make one new design. So you must understand where those flames got inspired from. They didn't just pop out of thin air. It's from the World Grand Prix. So you need to know where he got that from, and you only know that if you watch Cars 2. Number 4, who on earth is Jeff Gorvette? There's a scene in Cars 3 where he just casually goes by Jeff Gorvette, and he says, "Win one for us old guys." And McQueen obviously responds saying his name, knowing that he knows who he is. Now, you can argue that in Cars 2, he knows who Jeff Gorvette is before the World Grand Prix, but that's not the point. I'm not talking about when McQueen knew Jeff. I'm talking about when the audience knew Jeff. We only know Jeff from Cars 2, so it was really important that we establish that character in the audience's minds. So when you get to Cars 3 and his cameo is there, it actually makes sense, and you understand the cameo and you find it really nice. If you didn't watch Cars 2, then to you it's just another basic background NASCAR inclusion, but when it was much more than that, it was a cameo that you wouldn't understand properly unless you watched Cars 2. Speaking of Jeff Gorvette, his compadre, his partner in crime in Cars 2, basically, was Lewis Hamilton. Now, even though he doesn't appear physically in Cars 3 like Jeff Gorvette does, Lewis still has a role through his technological advancement product that he uses as a Siri. It acts like a Siri on your phone, but it's on the wrap of the racing center suits that tracks McQueen's speed and also cruises. And it has a little blue blinking in the headlights. Now, I know what you're going to say. Oh, well, McQueen didn't even know who Hamilton was, so that must mean that Cars 2 didn't happen. No. You see, you also need to watch the tall tales because those confirm that McQueen just has severe case of dementia and no one's been able to cure it. So McQueen just has horrible dementia. He forgets things easily. He might be worse than Dory from Finding Nemo. But you also, the audience, need to know who Lewis Hamilton is. Because, again, how are you going to know how that cameo works? Just like not knowing how Jeff Gorvette's cameo works, you need to watch Cars 2. Going at number 7, we have who Miles Axelrod is from Sterling's office. I'm sure so many of you saw that picture, and Roger, but we're going to ignore him. You see Miles Axelrod in the picture frame in Sterling's office. No one's going to know that's some sort of cool reference to Cars 2's main antagonist unless you watch Cars 2. It shows that maybe Sterling and Miles Axelrod have some sort of past history with each other. I mean, they surely have to if he has a picture of him up in his office, very obscure. I mean, it's not like I have pictures of my best friends up in my office, so they must be like really, really close. Borderline blood-related question mark? Who knows? But point being, you need to know who Miles is to, again, understand the significance and importance of that frame, and to also kind of establish that obviously Miles was the main villain of Cars 2. You need to also establish that Sterling is not exactly the best character in the world in Cars 3. What better way to establish that than to put little teases in the background of a Cars 2 character on a picture frame? Number 8, who the French couple are on TV. There's a scene before McQueen watches Chick's Picks late at night, seeing the odds of the chances he has to win the Florida 500. You see what they're called, John and Nancy, thanks to Mattel and their names for the 2014 releases. John and Nancy, that scene taken directly from Cars 2. But it's not just that. You need to understand who those characters are. Again, that scene was very important to watch in Cars 2 because it makes so much sense when McQueen goes and watches it because he's always been a very obscure person. Heck, Cars on the Road confirms that he also has an interest in dinosaur history. So I think it's totally in McQueen's character to understand French flicks. And you know what? John and Nancy, they were such good kissers. You need to know that from Cars 2. That's why they got an acting role to reenact that same kiss on the exact same bridge that they were in Cars 2. But Cars 2 is there to show you how good of kissing, how good they can, suck their lips together, John and Nancy. So you understand how they got their amazing big hit in Cars 3. Now we're actually going to number 9. That is Sally's weird tease of moving on from McQueen. I'm sure you guys remember Sally's little, I guess you can say, interest in Francesco. She kept teasing him all throughout Cars 2 with the Francesco Bernoulli. All that stuff, you know what I mean? And a little bit at the end too, before the Radio Springs Grand Prix happened. And in Cars 3, right after the Jeff scene that we just talked about, she said, I'm going to move on to the next rookie and forget I ever knew you. Cars 2 has to establish to the audience that Sally just teases McQueen like that, like she's going to move on from him. And Cars 2 is really important to know that, very, very, very crucial. At number 10, we have the Hudson Hornet Piston Cup logo in the Racing Center. I'm sure you guys remember the scene when McQueen's looking back on basically his wall that shows his entire Piston Cup history. And before you say,
there was nothing World Grand Prix related on that board.
Well, yeah, because guess what? The World Grand Prix isn't the Piston Cup. That was a Piston Cup specific career board. So now that we have that out the way, there was an HHPC logo. Where was that? That took place during the events of Cars 2, right before it, when the season ended. The season that honored Doc Hudson. So you need to understand where that Hudson Hornet Piston Cup specific race season happened. What's the context to it? Cars 2 establishes that context. Number 11, probably should have had this even higher on the list, but confirms Doc's death. We all know the one-off scene we get in Cars 2 when McQueen's telling Mater that he wished that Doc was there to see him win the Piston Cup. It wouldn't have felt right if someone else won it because it was Hudson Hornet specific. They don't come out and flat out tell you that he's dead, but they pretty much imply that he is in fact dead. And I don't know about you, but when I wasn't seeing Doc yet in Cars 2, I was definitely thinking maybe he just went on vacation, maybe Doc just needed a load off. Maybe he went to Hawaii and he hasn't been back because they lost some cell service or something. So it was not confirmed that he was dead in the Cars universe. That scene right there is so important to confirm to the audience that Doc's death is true. which was a big factor heading into Cars 3. His death plays a huge role. His impact plays a huge role. How are you supposed to know that he died without watching that scene from Cars 2? Tell me that one. Riddle me that one. Number 12, why Luigi and Guido got over Ferraris. Now, I know you guys are going to say,
Well, Pixar lost the rights to Ferraris. That's why not only are they not in Cars 3, but Luigi and Guido never talk about Ferraris in Cars 3.
no. There is a much deeper and maybe bittersweet reason for that. There were so many Ferraris at the Tokyo party in Cars 2. And even in Cars 2's timeline, do you remember Luigi and Guido mentioning Ferraris one bit after the Tokyo party? No, you didn't, because they had the ultra satisfaction at the Tokyo party. Picture me this. One Ferrari walked into their Casa della Tires at the end of Cars 1, and both of them knocked out on the floor. Like gay knocked out on the floor because they were so gay for Ferraris. Now, the Tokyo party had that, but like times what? 40, 50, maybe even more than that? You're not trying to tell me that they just wouldn't be satisfied? Maybe they just had their satisfaction and they moved on from Ferraris and they moved on to bigger and better things, like Italian chicks at Uncle Topolino's village that we see in Cars 2. Number 13. Confirms McQueen can still race on dirt. Now, I don't know about you guys, but I think this was definitely a very important detail to remember. He does also race on dirt in Cars 3 when he's just taking practice laps on Thomasville's racetrack. And in Cars 2, he uses the drift on dirt to get past Francesco at Tokyo. And obviously, he still kind of does it at the end near Willie's Butte. I needed to know for sure that McQueen can still race on dirt because bro took the entire first movie to finally learn how to finally drift on dirt, right? So it took him so long to actually master it. Who's to say that like it wasn't a one-off like moment of glory, you know? He just got lucky. So Cars 2 was very much needed so you could establish that that wasn't just a one-off thing and he truly now knows how to drive on dirt with ease. Number 14, Max Cars 2 design, which foreshadows the lack of a white box on Piston Cup cabs. All Cars 1 Piston Cup cabs have the common theme of a white box behind the sponsor logo on the cap of the cab. Cars 2's Mac design goes away from this with not having the white logo, and Cars 3's cab designs all fall under the same boat. It's just one color with the rest of the body. Like, if it was Vitaline, the Cars 1 would have a white background, but the Cars 3 version for Brick Yardley is all green. It flushes with the rest of the car. So that was important to know how the designs were going to lead into Cars 3. It was a very big foreshadowing. It was a very big detail that you needed to know to kind of foreshadow how fast Piston Cup evolves. It helps you kind of anticipate the next gens taking over and all that stuff. Number 15, confirms Mood Springs, Revolting, and Little Torquey Pistons are still Piston Cup sponsors. On Hudson Hornet Piston Cup McQueen's design, he has 3 contingency sponsors on the bottom, that being Mood Springs, Revolting, and Little Torquey Pistons, which does in fact confirm that all 3 of them are still sponsors in the Piston Cup, and sure enough, all 3 of them were in Cars 3 for the stock cars and next gens respectively. And that was a big detail. You had to know what sponsors to expect in Cars 3. It's a whole 11 years after Cars 1. Obviously, some are going to come and go, as we saw with some of the sponsors that got introduced and some that were left behind. But Mood Springs, Revolting, and Little Torquey Pistons, way back in Cars 2, foreshadowed that they were still around. And that was a very important detail. Number 16 confirms the Lightyear blimp wasn't murdered by jets. I don't know about you guys, but Barney Storman looked like he had PTSD when those jets were flying by and he ruined his cloud art, if you will. They looked menacing. They didn't say a single word. They just stood behind their shades. It's like they're hitmen, but in the sky edition. And a Lightyear blimp, big, obvious target. I would be scared that they were going to go after the Lightyear blimp and murder my guy. But in Cars 2, thankfully, it does confirm that the Lightyear blimp is still floating out and about. He was at the Porta Corsa race. So you don't got to worry that, he's still around for Cars 3, So thankfully the jets didn't get to him yet. Number 17 confirms Darrell is still a commentator. Now, I was definitely worried that Darrell would no longer be a commentator because he talks. And that's fine. You're a commentator. You're supposed to be yapping for fun, right? But he was talking and talking and talking, and who's to say he didn't lose his voice in the process? So, very important information to know that by Cars 2, Darrell still hasn't lost his voice from all his commentating. Number 18 confirms Red's still a big whiner. I'll just breeze through this one pretty quickly. Obviously, Red, very sensitive fire truck in Cars 1. Maybe he's soft. Maybe he got a little tougher, but he didn't. So Cars 2 has to establish that he's a little still kind of sensitive that way, because in Cars 3, he was also crying when McQueen was off to the racing center, and you need to understand to anticipate that one as well. Cars 2 is there for you. You're welcome, my friends. Number 19 confirms Ka-chow wasn't just a phase. This one is a huge one because Cars 3, McQueen never says Ka-chow. You only hear Ka-chow from Chick Hicks calling him old Ka-chow. Cars 2, he does still say Ka-chow. So if you went to Cars 1 and Cars 3, and in Cars 3 you didn't hear Ka-chow, maybe you would think that Ka-chow was just a phase, like a little catchphrase that he only said at the start from his young days, if you will. But Cars 2 establishes that Ka-chow is truly a phase that goes on throughout the franchise, that stuck with him for his career. I would be a little shocked that in 11 years he just never said it. It'd leave me with the question, well, when's the last time he says Ka-chow? So at least Cars 2 confirms that, Ka-chow is still something a part of him beyond the events of Cars 1. I was definitely kind of worried about that. At number 20, introducing Sally's love for talk shows. When she went into the Wheel of Mattel, when everyone was crowding around because they were watching the Mel Dorado show and watching Francesco talk shit about McQueen to Mater, Sally just immediately fell in love, not just with Francesco, but she fell in love with talk shows because she was thinking, look at all these amazing speakers on talk shows. This looks so comforting. This is like some sort of free time that I can just spend and just have a little fun watching shows. And sure enough, in Cars 3, she watches Chick's Picks with Chick Hicks quite often. So she clearly developed a love for talk shows from just coming by the Mel Dorado show. And Cars 2 is what confirms that and establishes that. So you understand why she's watching talk shows in Cars 3. At number 21, this goes alongside the working headlights, but I put it as another reason because taillights aren't headlights. And yes, we're talking about working taillights. He not only got working headlights, but he got working taillights because he was full of stickers in Cars 1. It wasn't just the headlights, it was also the taillights. So he got working taillights too. Goes hand in hand with the headlights. And before you know it, they're still in Cars 3. He has working taillights. Where do you think he got that from? Watch Cars 2. At number 22, this one's a little more specific, but it's very important to know the lore behind this. Prepare for Darrell's fat lies. You know what? Maybe he should have lost his voice because he spends too much time lying to us. So in Cars 2, he says, I don't know who that tow truck is, Brent. Yes, you do. In Cars, the video game, which is 100% canon, you were talking with Mater. You name-dropped Mater because he was your co-commentator for the Radiator Springs Grand Prix that he challenged Chick to 3 races. All throughout Ornament Valley. You were there, you were present, you oversaw the event with Mater. You know who Mater is. So you lied. And he only lied in Cars 2 because in case Mater got arrested for something, he didn't want to know him because then maybe he would be up for questioning and he'd have to testify his innocence from his involvement with Mater's life. And then in Cars 3, Cam Spinner just doesn't come back in the field after the crash of the Florida 500. Darrell tells everyone that everybody's coming back in. That was a lie. You never see Cam Spinner come back in. So it wasn't everybody, so that's another lie. You have to predict and anticipate that Darrell's lies come about. Because in Cars 1, Darrell doesn't lie. He never lied in Cars 1. That only came about from Cars 2. So you need to just understand that he's starting to become a little bit of a liar. It's kind of a part of his character arc that you're not going to understand if you just went from Cars 1 to Cars 3. At number 23, it confirms that another reckless race car didn't fuck up that road using Stanley. Specifically using Stanley. Not more so that another race car didn't come and wreck the road because they could have easily fixed it in the same time frame because McQueen fixed it in less than a week, right? But Stanley specifically, maybe he can survive one, but come on, it's a Stanley statue. You can only get lucky so many times. So if another race car did come about and fuck up the road with Stanley, I think that Stanley statue would be to bits. And in Cars 2, it isn't to bits. So it does confirm that the road is still intact and another race car didn't come and fuck up the town, which I think is very, very important once you get to Cars 3. Because, it's Stanley, I think Lizzie wouldn't be around because if that Stanley statue went about, I don't know, Lizzie probably would have just died from a heart attack or something like that. 24, confirms Mater's tow hook still works. This is very important because one of the only reasons why the quick plan to get Cruz out on the racetrack at the 4500 worked is because Mater successfully tows Sterling away and kind of distracts him a little bit, talking about mud flaps, which is teasing what we're going to end off on for our 25th reason. But Mater's tow hook does wonders in Cars 3, who uses it for so many things, but specifically when he's lifting McQueen in the air, defying physics, where McQueen's just kind of like gliding behind him while gliding his tow hook when he should be like dropping to the floor. But that tow hook is so strong that it not only defied physics, but also showed that McQueen has a slight interest in calisthenics, which is kind of interesting. This guy has so many secrets. What's next? His first name is Montgomery? Oh, wait. At number 25, confirms Mater still had a girlfriend to have a reason to talk about church flaps. And wedding flaps, for that matter. He was mentioning flaps when he was trying to distract Sterling, and he brought up some things that sound very specific, almost like he uses it for a certain special lady out there. Holly Shiftwell, only one of the most important characters in Cars 3, probably a top 3 main character in Cars 3, spends majority of the movie with Mater after the Tokyo events. And that's when Mater got his girlfriend. Like, yeah, maybe he broke up with her, but maybe they still keep in contact because they don't want things to be too awkward. Or maybe they weren't broken up until Cars 3. So Cars 3 has to establish why he would need wedding flaps. You know, it's not like he met some random girl named Doreen and then started smashing and crashing into her just so he could spoke to her. Oh, wait. That is the end of the video. This is why you must, not you maybe could or should, you must watch Cars 2 before you watch Cars 3. It is an important piece of media in the entire franchise of Cars. And if you even dare watch Cars 3 after Cars 1 and skip Cars 2, you're only killing your own storytelling. You need to fully understand this universe. And Cars 2 gives you that. They don't call it peak cinema for no reason.